Marcus Bradley never imagined that delivering a simple envelope would cost him everything he'd worked for. Standing before the imposing steel gates of Whitmore Federal Complex, he clutched the sealed document that had arrived at his law firm just 3 hours earlier. The return address read only, Internal Affairs Division. No name, no department. Just those 3 words that made his stomach turn.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The October rain hammered against the concrete barriers surrounding the complex, each drop echoing off the surveillance towers that loomed overhead like mechanical sentinels. Marcus adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, feeling the weight of 23 years of legal practice suddenly meaningless against the fortress before him. The envelope in his briefcase felt heavier than it should, its contents unknown but undeniably dangerous. "State your business," the guard's voice crackled through the intercom, emotionless and efficient. Marcus leaned toward the speaker mounted beside the reinforced checkpoint. "Marcus Bradley, attorney for Henderson & Associates. I have a delivery for Director Patricia Henshaw." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the mechanical whir of cameras adjusting their focus. The guard booth remained dark, its occupants invisible behind reflective glass that caught Marcus's nervous reflection. He could see his own pale face staring back, rain-soaked hair plastered against his forehead, eyes that betrayed the confidence his voice tried to project. "No scheduled appointments for Marcus Bradley," came the response, flat and final. "This wasn't scheduled. It's urgent legal correspondence that requires immediate delivery." Marcus withdrew the envelope from his briefcase, holding it up toward the camera. The paper was expensive, cream-colored with embossed letterhead he couldn't quite make out in the dim light. The guard booth remained silent for nearly 2 minutes. Marcus could hear hushed conversations behind the glass, radio chatter that sounded increasingly agitated. Finally, the intercom crackled back to life. "Step back from the gates, sir. Maintain your position." Marcus retreated several steps, his leather shoes splashing in the growing puddles. The rain intensified, soaking through his wool coat and making the envelope's edges soft in his grip. He watched as additional figures moved within the guard station, shadows shifting against shadows. His phone buzzed. A text from his law partner, David Henderson. "Any word on the Henshaw delivery?" The client called twice, asking for confirmation. Marcus typed back quickly. "At the facility now. Some delays with security." Quote. What he didn't mention was the growing knot in his stomach, or the way every instinct screamed at him to turn around and drive back to the safety of his downtown office. The client who'd requested this delivery had been unusual from the start. A woman who'd paid in cash, refused to provide her full name, and insisted the envelope be delivered personally to Director Henshaw before 5 o'clock today. "No postal service, no courier companies, no exceptions," she'd said, her green eyes intense behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Hand delivery only, Mr. Bradley. The contents are too sensitive for any other method." Now, standing in the rain outside a federal complex that looked more like a prison than an office building, Marcus wondered what exactly he'd agreed to carry. A new voice emerged from the intercom, deeper and carrying more authority. "Mr. Bradley, I'm Captain Torres, head of facility security. We're going to need additional verification before we can process your request." "What kind of verification?" "Your bar certification number, the nature of your business with Director Henshaw, and the identity of your client." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The mysterious client had been explicit. Her identity was to remain confidential at all costs. "Captain Torres, I'm bound by attorney-client privilege. I can provide my bar certification, but the client's identity and the specific nature of the correspondence must remain confidential." Static filled the silence that followed. Marcus could see more movement in the guard booth now, and he noticed additional security personnel taking positions along the perimeter fence. Their hands rested casually on their weapons, a subtle but unmistakable message. "Mr. Bradley, Whitmore Federal Complex operates under enhanced security protocols. Without full disclosure, we cannot grant you access to the facility or its personnel." The rain had soaked completely through his coat now, and Marcus felt water running down his collar. He thought about the woman who'd hired him, her urgent insistence that the envelope reach Director Henshaw today. He thought about the substantial cash payment now sitting in his firm's account. Most importantly, he thought about the legal and ethical obligations that bound him to protect his client's confidentiality. I understand your security concerns, Captain Torres, but I cannot violate attorney-client privilege. The correspondence is sealed and addressed to Director Henshaw. I'm simply the delivery mechanism. Another long pause. Through the rain, Marcus could see uniformed figures moving along the fence line, their radios chattering with increased frequency. The guard booth had gone dark, except for the red glow of monitoring equipment. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Without proper authorization and disclosure, we cannot accommodate your request. Marcus felt a surge of panic. The client had been clear. Failure to deliver the envelope today would result in consequences she hadn't bothered to specify. But the look in her eyes had been enough to convince him those consequences would be severe. Captain Torres, this is legitimate legal correspondence. I'm a licensed attorney with 23 years of practice. I'm not asking for access to classified areas or sensitive information. I simply need to deliver an envelope to Director Henshaw. The decision is final, Mr. Bradley. Please return to your vehicle and exit the premises immediately. As Marcus stood there, water dripping from his hair onto the sealed envelope, he realized he was caught between two impossible choices: violate his professional ethics by revealing his client's identity, or return to his office empty-handed and face whatever consequences the mysterious woman had implied. The envelope seemed to pulse in his hands, its weight growing heavier with each passing second. Inside that cream-colored paper lay secrets he couldn't imagine, information dangerous enough to require hand delivery to one of the most secure facilities in the state. And now, as security personnel continued to gather along the perimeter, Marcus began to understand that his simple delivery job had become something far more complicated and potentially dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Marcus retreated to his silver BMW, hands trembling as he fumbled with the keys. The envelope lay on the passenger seat beside him, its presence seeming to fill the entire vehicle with an oppressive weight. Rain drummed against the windshield as he sat in the parking area outside the complex, watching the security guards maintain their positions along the fence. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Bradley. The voice was unmistakably hers. The mysterious client with the green eyes and wire-rimmed glasses. Did you deliver the envelope? Marcus swallowed hard. There's been a complication. Security won't allow access without full disclosure of your identity and the contents. I explained about attorney-client privilege, but... Mr. Bradley, do you remember what I told you about timing? You said before 5 o'clock today. It's now 3:47. You have 1 hour and 13 minutes. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, then at the envelope. In the growing darkness of the storm, he could make out additional details on the paper, a watermark that looked like some kind of official seal, and what appeared to be multiple layers of security tape along the edges. A knock on his passenger window made him jump. A security guard stood in the rain, gesturing for him to lower the window. Sir, you need to move your vehicle. This is a restricted parking area. I'm waiting for authorization to make my delivery. The guard, a young man with Hispanic features and serious dark eyes, glanced back toward the complex. You're the lawyer with the envelope for Director Henshaw? That's right. Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Director Henshaw left the building an hour ago, emergency departure. Took a helicopter from the roof pad. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Where did she go? Above my pay grade, sir, but word is she won't be back today. The guard hesitated, then leaned closer to the window. You might want to try the downtown Federal building. Sometimes urgent business gets rerouted there. The guard walked away before Marcus could respond. The downtown Federal building. That meant Judge Patricia Henshaw, not Director Patricia Henshaw. His client had given him the wrong location, or perhaps the wrong title. Either way, he'd been standing in the rain outside the wrong facility for the past hour. Marcus started the engine and pulled out of the complex parking area. The downtown Federal building was a 20-minute drive in normal traffic, but the storm had snarled the city's roads into a nightmare of stalled cars and flooded intersections. As he navigated through the chaos, his phone buzzed with a text message. Time is running out, Mr. Bradley. Failure is not an option. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The downtown Federal Courthouse rose 32 stories into the gray sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the storm clouds that continued to churn overhead. Marcus hurried through the main entrance, his wet shoes squeaking against the marble floor as he approached the security checkpoint. "I need to see Judge Patricia Henshaw. It's urgent legal business." The security officer, an older African-American woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor, consulted her computer terminal. "Judge Henshaw is in chambers, but she's not seeing anyone without an appointment. The court finished early today because of the weather. This is time-sensitive correspondence that requires immediate delivery. Son, I've heard that line about 100 times this week. Everyone thinks their business is urgent." She studied Marcus's soaked appearance and the water dripping from his briefcase. "What kind of correspondence?" Marcus hesitated. The envelope felt radioactive in his hands, dangerous in ways he couldn't articulate. "Sealed legal documents. The client insisted on personal delivery to Judge Henshaw today." The security officer's expression shifted subtly. "Let me make a call." She picked up a phone and spoke in hushed tones for several minutes. Marcus could hear fragments of the conversation. "Attorney, urgent delivery. Won't identify the client." When she hung up, her face had hardened into professional neutrality. "I'm sorry, sir. Judge Henshaw's clerk says she's not expecting any deliveries today. Without an appointment or prior authorization, I can't allow access to her chambers. Could you at least ask if she'll see me? Tell her it's from someone who knows about Operation Clearwater." The words tumbled out before Marcus could stop them. He had no idea what Operation Clearwater was. The phrase had simply popped into his head, as if his subconscious had picked up something from the mysterious client's demeanor or word choice. The security officer's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She picked up the phone again, and this time her voice carried a different urgency. The conversation was brief, consisting mostly of yes and I understand from her end. When she hung up, she was already reaching for a visitor's badge. 23rd floor, Suite 2340. Judge Henshaw will see you immediately. Quote, the elevator ride felt interminable. Marcus watched the floor numbers climb, while clutching the envelope that had somehow become his key to accessing one of the most powerful jurists in the state. Whatever Operation Clearwater was, the mere mention of it had transformed him from an unwelcome visitor to an urgent priority. Suite 2340 was at the end of a long corridor, lined with oil paintings of former judges and legal scholars. The nameplate beside the heavy oak door read, "The Honorable Patricia M. Henshaw, Chief Judge." Marcus knocked twice. "Come in." Judge Henshaw was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore reading glasses and was reviewing a stack of legal briefs when Marcus entered. Her chambers were elegantly appointed with leather-bound law books, dark wood furniture, and windows that offered a commanding view of the storm-lashed city below. "Mr. Bradley, I presume." She didn't look up from her papers. "You mentioned Operation Clearwater." "I have a delivery for you, Your Honor. Sealed correspondence from a client who insisted it reach you today." Now she looked up, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. Not surprise, but recognition and fear. "Where is this client now?" "I don't know. She hired me this morning, paid in cash, and gave specific instructions about confidentiality and timing." Marcus placed the envelope on her desk. "She said failure to deliver this today would have consequences." Judge Henshaw stared at the envelope for a long moment without touching it. Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly as she removed her reading glasses and set them aside. "Mr. Bradley, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer truthfully. Did your client give you any indication of what's inside this envelope?" "No, Your Honor, she insisted on complete confidentiality." "And you have no idea who she is or what organization she represents?" "None whatsoever." Judge Henshaw reached for the envelope, then stopped herself. "Mr. Bradley, I want you to leave my chambers immediately. Go home. Don't speak to anyone about this delivery. Don't answer your phone for the rest of the day. Can you do that?" The fear in her voice was unmistakable now, and it infected Marcus with a growing sense that he'd stumbled into something far beyond a simple legal delivery. The envelope lay between them on the polished desk like an unexploded bomb, its cream-colored surface hiding secrets that could apparently terrify a federal judge. "Your Honor, what's in that envelope?" Judge Henshaw's hand hovered over the document, and for a moment Marcus thought she might actually tell him. Instead, she pressed a button on her desk intercom. "Security, I need an escort for Mr. Bradley." Immediately! Two security guards appeared within seconds, moving with military precision that suggested they'd been stationed just outside the door. Marcus found himself flanked by men whose hands rested casually near their weapons, their faces betraying nothing but professional alertness. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Bradley to the parking garage. Make sure he reaches his vehicle safely." Judge Henshaw's voice carried an undertone that Marcus couldn't decipher. Was she protecting him, or ensuring he couldn't interfere with whatever came next? As they guided him toward the door, Marcus caught a glimpse of Judge Henshaw reaching for the envelope with latex gloves she'd pulled from her desk drawer. The precaution sent ice through his veins. What kind of legal document required surgical gloves to handle? The elevator descent was silent except for the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. Marcus studied the reflection of the three men in the polished steel doors, himself looking disheveled and confused, flanked by guards whose posture suggested this was far from routine courthouse security. "What's Operation Clearwater?" Marcus asked quietly. Neither guard responded, but he caught them exchanging a look that confirmed his suspicion. They knew exactly what he was talking about. The parking garage stretched out in all directions, a concrete cavern filled with the vehicles of judges, clerks, and attorneys who'd left early due to the storm. Marcus's BMW sat alone in a pool of fluorescent light, looking ordinary and safe in a world that had suddenly become neither. "Drive carefully, Mr. Bradley," one of the guards said as Marcus unlocked his car. "Roads are dangerous in weather like this." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Marcus nodded and slid behind the wheel, watching in his rearview mirror as the guards remained in position until his taillights disappeared around the garage's exit ramp. The drive home should have taken 15 minutes. Instead, Marcus found himself taking a circuitous route through the city, checking his mirrors at every intersection. 3 different vehicles seemed to be following him: a black SUV, a gray sedan, and a white panel van that stayed consistently 2 or 3 cars behind, no matter which direction he turned. His phone rang as he navigated through a residential neighborhood he'd never seen before. "Mr. Bradley." The familiar voice of his mysterious client. But something had changed. The controlled politeness was gone, replaced by barely contained fury. "I delivered the envelope as requested. You delivered it 2 hours and 17 minutes late." Marcus glanced at his dashboard clock. It was 6:47 p.m. The security delays weren't. Delays that could have been avoided if you'd followed instructions precisely. Judge Henshaw was supposed to receive that envelope before her 3 o'clock conference call. A chill ran through Marcus as he realized the implications. His client had known Judge Henshaw's schedule in detail, including private conference calls that wouldn't appear on any public calendar. This wasn't simply about delivering legal documents. It was about timing something specific to the judge's activities. What was in that envelope? Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against his windshield and the steady hum of his engine. "Mr. Bradley, there are consequences to failure in certain types of business. You've created complications that will require adjustment." The line went dead. Marcus pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot and sat with the engine running, trying to process what had just happened. His involvement in whatever Operation Clearwater represented had ended, but he had the sinking feeling that his troubles were just beginning. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Channel 7 News. Breaking story about a federal judge. Turn on the TV immediately." Marcus hurried into the diner, where a television mounted above the counter showed a familiar face. Judge Patricia Henshaw, but not as he'd seen her 2 hours earlier. This was an older photograph, formal and dignified, with the word "deceased" in red letters across the bottom of the screen. "Can you turn that up?" Marcus asked the waitress. Judge Patricia Henshaw was found dead in her courthouse chambers at approximately 6:15 p.m. today. Initial reports suggest cardiac arrest, though federal investigators are treating the scene as suspicious pending autopsy results. Judge Henshaw, 52, had served on the federal bench for 11 years and was considered a leading candidate for the Supreme Court. Marcus felt the diner spinning around him. The envelope he'd delivered had somehow been connected to Judge Henshaw's death. Whether it contained poison, threats, or information that triggered her fatal collapse, he'd been the delivery mechanism for what amounted to an assassination. His phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Henderson & Associates, his own law firm. "Marcus, where the hell are you?" David Henderson's voice was tight with panic. The FB. I was just here asking questions about a client who hired you today. They want to see all records related to the delivery you made. What did you tell them? That we don't have any records because she paid in cash and didn't provide identification. Marcus, they're treating this as a federal investigation. They mentioned terrorism and conspiracy charges. Through the diner window, Marcus could see the black SUV that had been following him. It sat in the parking lot with its engine running, two figures silhouetted in the front seats. David, I need you to listen carefully. I was hired to deliver an envelope to Judge Henshaw. I didn't know what was inside, and I didn't know the client's real identity. But Judge Henshaw is dead, and I think I was used as an unwitting accomplice in her murder. Jesus Christ, Marcus, where are you now? I can't tell you that. If the FBI is already at the office, they're probably monitoring our communications. I need to turn myself in, but I want to do it through proper channels with legal representation. Don't move. I'm calling Criminal Defense Counsel right now. Marcus hung up and watched the SUV in the parking lot. A white panel van had joined it, parked at an angle that blocked both exit routes from the diner. Through the restaurant's front window, he could see additional vehicles taking positions along the street. The waitress approached his table with a coffee pot. You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. I might have. Marcus stood up and walked to the counter, where the television continued its coverage of Judge Henshaw's death. A new detail caught his attention. Federal investigators had found evidence of a sophisticated biological agent in the judge's chambers, something that could cause cardiac arrest within hours of exposure. The envelope. Whatever had been inside that cream-colored paper had killed Judge Henshaw, and Marcus had been the one to deliver it directly into her hands. Red and blue lights began flashing outside the diner. FBI vehicles, marked and unmarked, were surrounding the building with methodical precision. Marcus realized his mysterious client had never intended for him to escape the consequences of the delivery. He'd been chosen specifically because he was expendable, a legitimate attorney whose involvement would add credibility to what appeared to be a routine legal transaction. The diner's front door opened, and agents in dark suits entered with the controlled urgency of professionals who'd done this many times before. The lead agent, a woman with short blonde hair and steel-gray eyes, approached Marcus's table with her badge extended. Marcus Bradley, you're under arrest in connection with the death of Judge Patricia Henshaw. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Marcus caught his reflection in the diner's window. 24 hours ago, he'd been a successful attorney with a comfortable life and a spotless reputation. Now he was the primary suspect in the assassination of a federal judge, manipulated by forces he still didn't understand into becoming an unwitting instrument of murder. The mysterious woman with green eyes and wire-rimmed glasses had vanished into whatever shadow organization had orchestrated Judge Henshaw's death. But Marcus Bradley, the man who'd simply tried to do his job and deliver an envelope, would spend the rest of his life paying for a crime he'd committed without ever knowing he was committing it. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to clear, but for Marcus the darkness was just beginning. The FBI processing center buzzed with activity even at 9:30 p.m. Marcus sat in an interrogation room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale coffee, his wrists still bearing red marks from the handcuffs. Across the metal table sat Agent Sarah Chen, the blonde woman who'd arrested him, and Agent Miguel Rodriguez, a heavy-set man with intelligent eyes and a carefully trimmed beard. Let's go through this again, Mr. Bradley, Agent Chen said, consulting a thick file that seemed to have materialized from nowhere. You claim a woman hired you this morning to deliver an envelope to Judge Henshaw, but you have no record of her identity, no security footage from your office, and no witnesses to the transaction. I've told you everything I know. She paid in cash, insisted on confidentiality, and gave me explicit instructions about timing and delivery method. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. What we find interesting, Mr. Bradley, is your knowledge of Operation Clearwater. That's classified information known to fewer than 30 people in the entire federal government. How did you come up with that phrase? Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. I honestly don't know. It just came to me when I was trying to get access to Judge Henshaw. Like my subconscious picked it up from something the woman said or did. Convenient, Agent Chen muttered, making notes in her file. Mr. Bradley, Are you aware that Judge Henshaw was scheduled to rule on a case involving defense contractor irregularities next week? A case that could have resulted in criminal charges against executives at Meridian Defense Systems? The name meant nothing to Marcus, but he could see where the questioning was headed. Are you suggesting I was hired by defense contractors to eliminate a judge? We're suggesting that your mysterious client had intimate knowledge of federal court schedules, classified operations, and chemical weapons sophisticated enough to cause untraceable cardiac arrest. Agent Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many conspiracies to believe in coincidences. That's not exactly the profile of your average disgruntled litigant. A knock on the interrogation room door interrupted them. A young agent entered and whispered something to Agent Chen that made her eyebrows rise slightly. She excused herself, leaving Marcus alone with Agent Rodriguez. Off the record, Mr. Bradley, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen lawyers get mixed up in things they don't understand more times than I can count. If you're telling the truth about being manipulated, now would be the time to start thinking about cooperation rather than stonewalling. I am cooperating. I've answered every question you've asked. Have you? Rodriguez pulled out a smartphone and placed it on the table. We pulled your phone records. You received 4 calls today, from numbers that trace back to encrypted satellite phones registered to shell companies in 3 different countries. The woman who hired you wasn't some random client. She was part of an international network. Marcus stared at the phone, trying to process the implications. His simple legal delivery had been orchestrated by people with resources spanning multiple continents. The woman with green eyes had been a professional operative, not a nervous client seeking legal services. Agent Chen returned, her expression grim. Mr. Bradley, we just received some information that changes the nature of our conversation. Judge Henshaw wasn't the only target today. She placed a series of photographs on the table. Marcus recognized courthouse buildings from different cities: Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, Denver. Each photo was marked with a red X and a timestamp from earlier that day. 4 federal judges received similar envelopes today, delivered by 4 different attorneys who were hired by clients matching your woman's description. All 4 judges are dead. All 4 attorneys are in custody. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. He wasn't an isolated case. He was part of a coordinated attack on the federal judiciary. Somewhere, a sophisticated organization had identified 5 attorneys in 5 different cities and manipulated them into becoming delivery systems for a mass assassination plot. The other attorneys, Marcus whispered, do they remember where they were recruited? How were they contacted? That's what's interesting, Agent Rodriguez said. Each of you was approached differently, but all through channels that seemed perfectly legitimate. A referral from a trusted colleague. A recommendation from a bar association contact, a client who found you through your firm's website. Whoever orchestrated this spent months studying potential targets. Agent Chen spread out additional documents, financial records, phone logs, surveillance photos. Mr. Bradley, your mysterious client didn't just walk into your office this morning. She's been watching you for at least 6 weeks. We have footage of her observing your lunch routines, following you to court appearances, even sitting in your office building lobby reading magazines while timing your daily schedule. The photograph showed a woman Marcus now recognized, but wearing different clothes, different hairstyles, even different glasses. In one image, she sat in the coffee shop across from his office building. In another, she walked behind him as he entered the courthouse for a routine hearing. The systematic surveillance made his skin crawl. What did she want with the judges? What was in those envelopes? Biological weapons, Agent Chen said flatly. Specifically engineered toxins that cause cardiac arrest within 2 to 4 hours of exposure. No trace in standard autopsy procedures. No obvious symptoms until it's too late. The kind of thing that takes years to develop and costs millions to produce. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. Who has that kind of resources? That's what we're trying to determine. But Mr. Bradley, here's what we know for certain. This wasn't domestic terrorism. The coordination, the funding, the technological sophistication all point to foreign state actors. You were used as an unwitting agent in what amounts to an act of war against the American judicial system. The interrogation room door opened again, and a man in an expensive suit entered. He was tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Agents Chen and Rodriguez, I'm Deputy Director Morrison from the National Security Division. Mr. Bradley, I need to speak with you about Operation Clearwater. The phrase that had gained Marcus access to Judge Henshaw now seemed to hang in the air like a toxic cloud. Deputy Director Morrison took a seat and opened a leather portfolio that contained documents bearing classification stamps Marcus had only seen in movies. Mr. Bradley, Operation Clearwater was a joint task force investigation into foreign infiltration of American legal institutions. Judge Henshaw was the lead judicial oversight for the operation. The other 4 judges who died today were also involved in Clearwater in various capacities. So this was retaliation? More than that. It was the surgical removal of the key personnel who could have exposed a network that's been operating in this country for over a decade. Morrison's voice carried the weight of national security implications that extended far beyond Marcus's understanding. The woman who hired you and the 4 others like her represent just the tip of an iceberg we're only beginning to comprehend. Agent Rodriguez consulted his notes. Mr. Bradley, I'm going to ask you to think very carefully about every detail of your interaction with this woman. Did she have any accent? Any unusual mannerisms? Did she mention traveling or reference any locations outside the United States? Marcus closed his eyes, trying to recall details that had seemed unimportant at the time. She knew the city very well, made specific references to traffic patterns and courthouse schedules. But now that I think about it, she never used contractions when she spoke. Everything was very formal, very precise. English as a second language, Agent Chen noted. Probably Eastern European or Scandinavian, based on the syntax patterns we're seeing from the other cases. Deputy Director Morrison leaned back in his chair. Mr. Bradley, I'm going to be direct with you. You're facing federal charges that could result in life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Conspiracy to commit murder of federal officials, terrorism, treason, the list is extensive. Marcus felt the walls of the interrogation room closing in around him. But I didn't know. Ignorance isn't a defense in cases of this magnitude. However, your cooperation could significantly impact how the Justice Department chooses to proceed with prosecution. What kind of cooperation? Morrison opened his portfolio and withdrew a single sheet of paper. We want you to help us identify the woman who hired you. We have facial recognition software, voice analysis technology, and behavioral profiling systems that could benefit from your first-hand observations. Marcus stared at the document Morrison had placed before him. It was a cooperation agreement, dense with legal terminology that would essentially transform him from suspect to government witness. If I sign this, what happens? You work with our investigation team to help identify and locate the operatives responsible for today's attacks. In exchange, the terrorism and treason charges are dropped, and you're looking at conspiracy charges with the possibility of reduced sentencing based on the extent of your cooperation. Agent Chen added, Mr. Bradley, we believe this network is planning additional attacks. Your information could help prevent more deaths. The weight of 5 dead federal judges pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He thought about Judge Henshaw, alive and terrified just hours earlier, now dead because he'd placed an envelope in her hands. He thought about 4 other attorneys sitting in interrogation rooms like this one, facing the same impossible choice between cooperation and condemnation. What do you need me to do? Quote. Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the room. Help us hunt down the people who turned you into a weapon, Mr. Bradley. Help us make sure they never use another unwitting attorney to commit murder again. As Marcus reached for the pen Morrison offered, he realized that his life as a simple attorney was over forever. Whether he spent the next decade in prison or working as a government asset, the man who'd walked into his office that morning seeking routine legal work no longer existed. The woman with green eyes had killed more than 5 federal judges. She'd murdered Marcus Bradley's old life as efficiently as she'd eliminated her judicial targets. But unlike her other victims, Marcus was still breathing, and that meant he had a chance for something the judges would never have. Revenge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.